we have to start off with a few important guests. But let me touch on the questions. The questions we have 4 discussion points for the first part. The first is, how does the disproportionately small number of Black academics affect higher education as a whole? So how does the number of academics, which we say are disproportionate, affect higher education as a whole? The second is, we'll be asking you guys, who will be in the panel, to tell us how your experiences in the institutions you're part of, previous current institutions, whether you see any inclusivity, or how have you managed to combat what we call institutional whiteness within academia. The third question is, what measures and initiatives do you think can be used to serve as a roadmap to bridge the gap in this area? And the final question is, how best do we combat this issue and support the community of Black academics? So these are the 4 key questions we'll be asking ourselves, and I'll be inviting the panelists to have a conversation about, and also to the guests to give their own views. Now, for the first panel, we have 3. We should have 4, but unfortunately, Edward is not with us right now. He had an emergency. So we have Charlie Dove-Edwin. I'll let Charlie introduce himself. Charlie but he's a lecturer from Richmond University, a financial analyst, and he's been with PROWIBO since 2015 when we started. But for the virus, would have been in Freetown and Lagos by now, at the University of Lagos. However, we're all stuck in our respective homes, not doing anything. So I'll ask Charlie to give us a short introduction about himself. Come on, Charlie.
Yeah, hi, I'm Charlie Dove-Edwin. I am an associate professor at Richmond, the American University in London. I came to academia late in life. I was an accountant at Ernst & Young, and then worked in the city for a number of years. I teach finance, and I have been working as a professor for about the last 4 or 5 years.
Thanks, Charlie. The second panelist is Dauda Abubakar from the University of Michigan. I've never met Dauda, but from the short introductions, Dauda seems to be an exciting young man. So if you can just tell us a bit about yourself, that'll be great, Dauda.
Yes, thank you very much, Majek. My name is Dauda Abubakar, and I'm originally from Nigeria, but currently I'm based in the US at the University of Michigan in Flint, and I teach in the fields of political science and African studies. And I have been in the academia for over 20 years so far. I taught first at the University of Maiduguri in Nigeria, and at one point I'd also taught at Ohio University here in the US. And then now I'm based at University of Michigan in the States.
Thank you, Dauda. Thank you. Now the next panelist is Faith Musyoka-Gahamanyi. Did I get that right, Faith?
Yes, that's correct, actually.
Good. Can you tell us about yourself, Faith?
Okay, hi everyone. So I'm a nutritionist, an educator. I joined higher education about 6 or so years ago. Previous to that, I was a nutritionist. And I'm Kenyan, but residing in Rwanda. So I've taught in Kenya at the University of Eastern Africa, Baraton, for about 4 years. And then I moved to Rwanda, where I was part of Davis College Aquila, formerly the Aquila Institute for Women. So that's where I recently worked, but I'm currently doing some freelance work.
We have the four questions which have been posed, and I'll ask Dauda to kick us off and get this going.
Okay, thank you very much, Majek. And when I looked at the questions and reflected on what I do as a scholar who is of minority background in a predominantly white institution, it really makes this conference even more important. I'll quickly give you a short information about the institution where I am based. It's called the University of Michigan-Flint, which is part of the University of Michigan system. And it's about 7,500 students. And the city itself has a population of about 100 to 120,000 people, and 80% of the population in Flint is predominantly Black African American. Okay, but when one gets into the university itself, you find that the population of the students is disproportionate in terms of race and identity, and so you find that the population of students of color, for example, whether it's African Americans or Latino, would be barely maybe less than 15%. Okay, and then for the faculty, the composition of the faculty that teach who are of minority background would be barely about 10% at most, or even less. So at my university, there is that disproportionate number of people of color. And by implication, it means that when a scholar like me in an institution that's predominantly white, first it raises the question of moving in the hierarchy. In other words, when it comes to issues of promotion, for example. Okay? Although I have a tenure in the institution, but I have seen cases of minority faculty, women in particular, that may have put in their best and at the end of the day could not gain tenure. And part of the explanation would be that, one, they may not have been mentored effectively. Okay? So the point I'm making is that there is systematic or institutional racism that plays into this problem. And I hope that in the afternoon we can try and flesh out this element, systemic or institutional racism. In other words, that even though Jim Crow laws and segregation in the United States here may not be as open as it is, but we know very well that within institutions of higher learning, there is still embedded in the bureaucracy, in the structures of power, that sense of exclusion, especially towards faculty, scholars of minority background. The other second question, if I may, Majek, is that what measures have been taken? At the University of Michigan-Flint, we had a new chancellor recently, who is of of a minority background, if I may say, because he is of Indian descent, and a faculty also that was recruited and started just on 1st of August, who is an African American and female, that is the provost. And I believe for the first time in the over 50 years of this institution, we have a person of color that is in the position of provost. But what the chancellor has done is that, recognizing this sense of exclusion that is going on in our institution, he set up what is called the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative, which is composed of both faculty and staff, a small committee that is to look into this issue of non-inclusion of both students and faculty that are of minority background. And that initiative, which is called the DEI, was set up as a result of a campus-wide survey that was conducted, what we call the Environmental Studies Survey, in which faculty, students, and staff were asked a whole range of questions about issues of identity, issues of race, issues of exclusion, issues of perception of being accepted as you are in the system. And so this initiative has just taken off. And so we are still hoping and waiting that it would at least lead to some modest changes in University of Michigan-Flint. So Majek, I will put it at this point, and then maybe someone can chime in at this stage, and maybe in the next round I can go on to the other questions. Is that okay?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dauda. So from what you're saying, in your institution, there's been some sort of a move by the university to combat the issue of diversity within academia.
Exactly.
By way of a question, how was this? How has this been greeted by the stakeholders?
Yeah, that's a good question. The overall reception of this initiative so far looks positive, because to my mind there has been no open opposition to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative that the Chancellor has just started. But we are yet to see, because it's barely about 2-3 months now. And you know, the issue is that power is always very sweet, and those that are holding power wouldn't want to just relinquish it. Okay, the privileges that comes with power, right? Those that are in a position of power wouldn't always want to relinquish it. So I hope that there will be no backlash. But so far, people are participating. People are saying, well, this is something that we needed in the institution so that we can have a more inclusive environment.
Can I move on to you now? What are your views on this, Charlie?
They are a mess. Many things come to mind as to what our issues are. I guess I start with the first point that I'd always say is, how many blacks want to become academics? That in my day, and I'm old, 57, when I went to university, you'd be lucky if 3% of any class got a first-class degree, and they were the academics. Those that got 2 1s, 2 2s, or playing sports, drinking beer, having a good time. They were clever enough, but they didn't want to be academics. So you started from my generation at a very high level of those people that want to do it. We then have the ethnicity, which says if you're black and you go to an English university, you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. Whatever you do, you don't want to be paid like an academic. So in terms of the history, it wasn't our thing. So this has changed since modern university, where there's a lot more firsts these days and the opportunities are greater. And perhaps more black people will want to become academics. And we need to look at that. In terms of where I work, Richmond, the American University in London, I would say the ethnics are by far the majority, but they're not British universities. So there are at least, if I say maybe there might be 25 academics in the business school, blacks would be overrepresented. There's me, there's the maths lecturer, and one accountant. So 3 out of 25 would have been black. The secretary is also black at this moment in time. So I don't think we miss out on terms of representation these days. And of the 3, 2 Nigerians, 1 Kenyan. However, I can see the point that in terms of running this show, it is not black people that we're running this. And how we look at it in terms of pay, etc., we will be at the bottom end of the scale. We will be the adjuncts. If I think one of the 3 is full time, and he's been there. He teaches maths. He is probably the head mathematician. So while they tell you the jobs are available, we are represented, we're not going further than that. We are the academics there. So the question becomes to me, what subjects do we want to teach? Is it Dauda, you talk about African studies, etc. That's the things that interest me. But if you're living in the UK, you're not going to get a lot of students that want to study that versus the rest. So while we can be academics, are we the ones to teach medicine, engineering, law, when as an African, if you've done those qualifications, you'll be working as one of those? So I do think there's hope that the numbers will increase, but in terms of who we are we there yet? I think we will become there once the younger generation, who have more firsts than the older generation, can qualify to be academics. We might get there. But the question that always nags at my heart is that, if I wanted to be an academic, why don't I go and teach in Africa? Why would I debate with them that the university lecturers are all white when if I went to an African university, they'll be black and they wouldn't have this issue? And that ultimately, should we go home and teach our own people? And any of our own people living in the UK or in America, they too should think about going home. And they will get the teaching they want. If all us academics who are black all around the world said we'll go and teach in Africa, our own standards would rise. Slightly controversial, I know, but I'm like, why don't we just go home? Anybody
Thank you very much, Charlie.
Any more?
Charlie, your idea is wonderful. The only downside of that is that if we go away from here, we'll leave many other black students alone in the hands of white lecturers. So I think it's important for us to stay around for a while, don't you think?
The day the Africans in London say they want to go and study in Unilag, it's a good day for all. Or wherever they want to go and study in Africa, if they apply instead of to UCAS or anything else, they say, you know what, I'd really like to go to the University of Bamako, then we've done our job.
Thank you very much, Charlie.
We'll be there first.
We've had two sort of different experiences. We have Dauda from the US and Charlie from the UK. Let's have Faith from Rwanda. See what Faith has to say about this.
Hi, everyone. My experience has been with two institutions. So in one institution, we didn't really notice it that much because the white faculty, so to say, were the minority instead of the majority. So the attempt was made by the university to make sure everything was equal, so that you don't feel marginalized in your own homeland. Unfortunately, in the second college, that's where the problem was, because as much as the faculty were, the Black faculty were more, there was a lot of inequality, and it was clearly visible. So it's also pretty sad that the management in the second college didn't do much to make sure there was anything equal, or to make the white people kind of tended to feel superior. And I'm still wondering what would have changed much if that had been changed. But that was the case. The first place, everything was equal, with the white being the minority, and the second place, the white people were less, but really felt a little superior. And the Black people, you could tell they felt like you could not progress beyond a certain position. For example, you knew that if I'm lecturing, and I'm staying here, I'm only going to be lecturing. I cannot hold a managerial position. It's not going to happen. And even if by chance I do have a managerial position, I can only be in the junior management position. I cannot progress beyond that. So that's number one. And then, measures in the first university, the pay scale, they made sure that the pay scale was the same. So whether you were white, whether you were from Africa, or wherever you were from, the pay scale was regular. It was just the same. It was your qualifications that determined just how much you got paid, which was pretty good. In the second college, there was a huge disparity. In fact, people rarely discussed salaries because we knew for a fact that the white people heading the organization were paid much, much more. And they were actually paid in dollars, so to say, and the others were paid in local currency. So already you can tell that there's a disparity right there. So back to you, Mr. Majek.
I want to ask a question to three contributors. What Faith mentioned pay and progression. Do any of you have any experience in publishing? How as a Black academic, how easy is it for you to publish articles or journals or things you've written in Western publications?
I haven't attempted to publish in a Western journal, so I don't have any experience with that. But I know African journals are more than willing to take our papers when we do have them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Thank you. Dauda.
Yeah, I think for people that are of minority background, even publishing in high level journals within their field becomes a major challenge, because it operates more like a network form of system where editors and reviewers know one another, and they know the importance of this in terms of promotion and the advancement of scholars within their field. And so for people that are of minority background, it usually becomes very difficult to crack the ceiling. That is not to say that there are no people of Black minority background that are able to publish, but you find that there is that network system. There are gatekeepers, if I should use that word, gatekeepers that usually allow who is it that will then get published, and who is it eventually therefore becomes recognized. In my field of political science and African studies, for example, I know of very good African scholars. Okay, people like Mahmoud Mamdani, for example, who is Harvard trained, someone who has done a lot of research on Africa, someone who has written extensively on Africa. But when you look at some of the publications in the topmost journals that are writing about Africa, they would not quote his work. Okay, even though the subject matter that they are discussing, he has written with authority on that subject matter. So there is a lot of politics to our field and what we do as a profession, even though sometimes we want to say that, oh, we are scholars and it is objective. But my experience and my own perspective is that there is a lot of politics that goes into it, even in publication. You know, someone may have a well-written journal article, and yet because he or she is not within that network, he or she may not have been referred by someone who is part of the gatekeepers. That article ends up not being published, right?
Thank you very much, Dauda. So so from what you're telling us is that there is the issue of sort of gatekeeping.
Exactly. Exactly.
Where articles are not being published because they're written by minority or black academics. If I can dig deeper into what you've said, Dauda, what do you think this gatekeeping consists of? What are the barriers, the hoops that has to be jumped over this gate to get these papers published, for example, from what you know?
Yeah, yes, yeah, that's a good question, Majek. I think what scholars would need to do is to begin to also put up journals, for example, that will acknowledge that that type of work is relevant, that it speaks to the field that they are studying, and that it is worth bringing into the community of learners, right? And I think one example that I may throw out here is what Codesria is doing in Dakar, Senegal. I believe that some of us may have heard about Codesria. Is the Council for Development and Research in the Social Sciences. It's based in Dakar, Senegal, and they do a lot of productive scholarship. Many scholars that are of African background, and even some from the Western world, do publish in the type of things that Codesria is doing. So I think it's that type of initiatives that we need to begin to encourage. Okay, centers that would be drawing conferences, and in fact, what you are doing in PROWIBO, right? Professors Without Borders, down the road, maybe you might want to think about floating a journal, right? That would begin to give platform to these type of ideas that are part of the knowledge in the fields that people are studying, and yet in the other journals in the field, they may have not been allowed to publish. And so it gives an avenue for that type of debate, for that type of conversation, for that type of discourse, for those type of ideas to be publicized in the field and be recognized as part of knowledge that is contributing to our understanding of reality, right? But I'll stop at that point.
Thank you very much, Dauda. Charlie, do you want to contribute on this point at all? The issue of publishing.
What I would say is that we as Africans should be able to do this in our own capacity. And if the papers are appreciated in Africa, that's where we should publish. And that you've seen, I guess it's part of a wider theme that I have, that the Asians and the Jewish were able to make themselves publishers and and somehow get to the top end of big jobs in the world. Now, unless we have that, there's nobody promoting us unless we do it ourselves. We've got to somehow find a publisher that will be willing to invest in that sort of thing from an academic perspective, also to invest in African universities. And one of the good things that I've noticed in the last month since the whole George Floyd thing is that I am seeing a lot of people writing to say, there are no Black people at the senior level in investment banking. We have got funding for 100 internships for Black students. I've also seen that with a law firm that have said, we will take 3 Black kids, regardless of university degree, preferably without a university degree, and we will train them to be lawyers. This is our moment to kind of get that stuff going. People are willing to say, okay, we will redress the balance, we will contribute. So if publishing in academia is a problem, then academics need to get together and find somebody who will. One of the big publishers, Schuster and whatever they are, or the academic publishers, and say, okay, would you commit to at least 2% of your publishing fund going to Black academics? Whatever the percentage you think it should be, it could be 2, it could be 5. They are publishing, and try and do it that way. This is the moment to try and make change happen. I think we should do it.
Thank you very much, Ali. One final contribution from Faith before I open the floor to any questions. I think there's a lot to talk about, and I think it's important for our voices to be heard on this point. So I will open the floor for questions earlier than 3:05, with Marianne's permission. Faith, anything from you before we go to the audience?
Yes, in such situations, probably provide equal opportunities, even if, because I believe that students of color, at least as Professor George mentioned, that a few of them may want to become academicians, but what incentives do they have to become academicians? Make that accessible, make them want to actually see that, provide role models so that they want to see that, I see Professor George, he's doing a good job, I want to be like him. And, let's also take up this mantle and mentor the ones that are behind us, because probably the reason we have with where we are is there was no mentorship in the past. People had to struggle to get to where they are. And if that was made easier, it's possible we might actually have more academicians, Black academicians on board. So, and then also promote people according to merit, not because of color. So that's what I would say. Thank you very much.